Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 6th week of the Genetic Care webinar series, Embracing Change. Some of us have had the honor and privilege to go back to work, others and kids going back to school, while others still cocoon in their homes, dealing with what many of us couldn't have imagined would happen months before this started. So we've talked about a lot of different topics and had all different members of our core team visit. And now today we have Sukaiyna Gokal, the Imagineer. We'll let her explain what that even means at Genetic Care, and the founder of the Garden of Ayden, visit us today to share with us, to discuss the voice with which we speak to ourselves. So without further ado, Sukaiyna, welcome. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the honor and privilege of sharing your wisdom with us today. And let's have some fun.
Thank you, Feisal. Thank you for having me. So starting with the topic of contextual reality. What does it mean when we say our contextual reality? As Feisal just said, we're all in different time zones, we're in different places. We're all going through different events, but the word context itself, for those of you who know me, know I like definitions of words. So the word context means the circumstances that form the setting for an event or statement, idea, in terms of which it can be fully understood. Now, imagine that all of us have a similar reality in terms of having been faced with this wonderful thing of COVID-19. And yet we're all living it differently, experiencing it differently. But it goes to show us that we're actually not controlling anything. Life has a way of happening to us when we think, or we can plan, or we can be in control of events we can't be. So the context is actually also linked to our context, because each of us, be it from the mind, be it from the heart, be it from the spirit, we're all completely different. Not only we're all completely different, we can be siblings or having brought up the same way, but because of our experiences, our tacit knowledge is developed based upon what we've learned and how we've learned it. So each context in my life depends on what my experiences were, just as each context in your life. So two people having gone through exactly the same thing will handle it totally differently because they've had a different experience. So we all measure things according to how we've learned it. Now, the question becomes, how can we adapt to knowing the voice we speak to ourselves with is the right one? We don't sit at dinner table conversations and talk about our own inner thoughts. So who is the person that you are in speaking to yourself? If your friend asks you for advice and you give them caring advice, do you give yourself the same caring advice? Or are you tough with yourself? So the things I don't know much about but what I do know is that we all have the tools within us to cope with anything that comes our way. We all have the capacity to stretch and to grow in any area that we need. So my question to you is, in this context of what's been happening this year, what are the positive things that have happened for you? What are the things that have made you feel good? What are the things that made you realize different things about yourself? And people are geared to negative news, negative impact. But what about all the positive impact? I mean, the nature is flourishing right now. Nature is doing so well, beautifully well. And maybe there's a good reason why all of this has happened. Are we able to reframe our thought processes into a positive frame of mind? So if you have any thoughts, please do write them in the Zoom, in the chat or in the Q&A. I don't know which one, Feisal, so that we can.
Chat, please. Yeah, please share in the chat. So what are the good things that we have all experienced during this time of cocooning? Right, let's begin with that. Is that okay, Sukaiyna? That's what you asked, right?
Absolutely. So that, I mean, so then we can keep going, and as people respond, I don't know if I can see the chats. Are you able to see it? There we go.
Yes. So.
Goes with the family time. So if we are experiencing negativity, or we're experiencing the what ifs, because none of us know what's happening tomorrow. None of us know what the world is going to look like soon. How are we actually living with that? Because people usually have fear. The fear is always of the unknown. Whatever one cannot grasp. And this is a situation no one can grasp. So coming to the voice inside your own minds, what are you telling yourself every day? And how are you living this? With gratitude and blessings, or are you living this with fear? So a lot more family time with the children and time to reflect. What positivity can you see that you've drawn or learned or grown with this experience? Are there things that you realize about yourself that you didn't realize before, perhaps? So when we share the slides with you, Feisal will be sending you the slides. There's the slides about the iceberg. And the iceberg is literally a notion that, in an iceberg, all you see is the tip. You can't see anything more. All we come to with ourselves is this, we show just a little part of ourselves, which is the coping part. And that coping is not necessarily how we're coping within, it's how we're coping without. So if we're saying what we mean and we're meaning what we say, we're able to be one person wholesomely within and without. And that person then, if you're aligned, you're able to float and be in bliss with whatever's going on. The external circumstances, mental, physical, emotional, spiritual, are there to help you and to guide you. So if we can take our inner critic and we can actually silence our inner critic, to actually just become a positive cushion for yourself, to be able to tell yourself, you know what, it's okay. Everything's going to be okay. A chance to journal and to write, introspection. Perfect. I mean, these types of circumstances, as we know, are the things that actually give us an opportunity to expand, to grow, to be a different version of ourselves. Now, if by nature you are an extrovert, you will have had a harder time with the confinement than someone who's introverted, because the need to be out and to be able to communicate through other people becomes important. As an introvert, the inner reflection was fine, but something like a Zoom call is more daunting because it requires an extroversion. So the key is, if you are clear with who you are and what you want in terms of your own well-being, in terms of your own person, your values, what are the things that you are experiencing that you can actually say to yourself, well, this is a great experience because I'm growing through it. And I'm growing one day at a time, every step of the way. And I'm noticing with a cognitive eye, if you hold yourself with a cognitive eye from above, and you're watching yourself and you're observing, where is it that you're getting nervous? Where is it that you're getting anxious? What is it that triggers you? And by learning through the tools of being able to keep expanding minute by minute, day by day, our children are a sponge that reflect off us. So our nature, we can see it in our children's eyes. We can see it in our children's behaviors. So being able to witness that and having that time with the children and doing the homeschooling with them is a great opportunity to connect on a deeper level. So if we are counting our blessings every minute of every day, as opposed to using the time for worry or fear, we're able to connect better, not only with our children, but with ourselves. So the next point I want to make with you is that if we are, it's a slide that you will see, unconsciously incompetent. That means I don't know that I don't know something. And I'm peaceful because I don't know that I don't know. And then I become consciously incompetent, which means I realize that there's something that I need to learn, that I need to grow with. And I suddenly strive to get the information and to learn and to understand something. And I become consciously competent, where I pat myself on the back and I say, well done, you know it. But then it takes time. Once the habit is absorbed, once you get used to being in that way, you can actually then become unconsciously competent, which means that it's a new skill set that you've learned, that you've grown with. Yeah. But any change requires a bit of chaos in between. Why? Because as we adapt to new habits, things go out of skelter because we have to adapt. Yeah. So as we're adapting, we see a new reality or we learn something new, we realize that everything's changed because our inner view has changed. Now, while that inner view is changing, what's going on around you in your relationships? So people around you suddenly don't realize, they think they don't understand you anymore because you're behaving differently perhaps. But if you're actually aligning with yourself, then there's no reason for anyone to misinterpret you because you are being wholesomely yourself, right? And you're saying what you mean and you're meaning what you say. Now, the communication skills required to be able to be congruent at all times depends on that alignment of mind, heart, spirit all together. So if we want to have this cognitive eye and we look at ourselves from afar and we're watching ourselves, we learn about the way others interpret us and the way we interpret ourselves. Now, I had a client who came to see me. He sent me his form, and in his form he had written that he was chubby, he had written that he was shy as a child, he had written that he was stuttering a lot. And so I saw the whole detail of this person, and then in walked a gentleman who was handsome, who was confident, who was self-secure. So the voice he was carrying in his mind about himself versus the reality of himself were two completely different things, and he had not realized it. So a lot of times how we speak to ourselves and what we project outwards can be completely opposite. And the question to ask ourselves is, are we really getting to know ourselves properly? And are we being kind to us? If we're used to absorbing negativity or we're tough on ourselves, who are we damaging? Only us. And Henry Ford said, if you think you can or you cannot, you are right. What does it mean? It means that we are the only gauge for ourselves as to whether we can achieve something or not. And the power remains within us. So that freedom of having the power to actually choose the voice with which you speak to yourself is fundamental in the journey of alignment. So it's the pillars of enlightenment are non-judgment, non-resistance, and non-acceptance, right? So if we are not judging ourselves to start with, we are able to release any pressure that we put upon ourselves, yeah? So starting there, the voice that we speak to ourselves with, for example, if I well, in the past, because now we're not doing that anymore, but if I was running in the shower to go for a meeting and I told myself I'm going to be late, inevitably I would be late because I've actually fed my subconscious with the thought. So the power of thought is fundamental to understand that whatever we say to ourselves, we end up making projections, we end up making, we end up creating negativity for ourselves because of how we're speaking to ourselves. So just starting there, what is the way that you speak to yourselves? Can you write me 2 words, 3 words? If you want to, words. How do you speak to yourself? Are you kind to yourself? Are you harsh with yourself? And tough, why? What is the reason that you would be tough with yourself? How does it help you to expand and to grow by being tough? Demanding. See, the question is, if we can have high standards for ourselves, which is high results that we seek and that we plan for, but at the same time being kind and being low maintenance. So there's a balance to be struck in saying, yes, I'm pushing myself the hardest I can, and I always will, but those are the standards I'm setting for myself. It's like a cheerleader rather than a critic. So if we are balanced and we are structured in the way we're functioning, we can actually be our toughest taskmasters, but be our cheerleader at the same time. So they say that if you make a list of things you have to do, and you finish something, you should put a tick next to it, because that's a shot of dopamine that comes into your body. And then even if you've forgotten to write something on the list that you wanted to do, write it down and then put a tick, because you can actually have a shot of dopamine, right? So there's different ways of structuring it, because mind, heart, body, soul, right? There's so many different sides to each of us, and the voices within us are coming from, be it a teacher when we were small, a painting that wasn't good enough. I mean, it can come from anywhere, and we all have every aspect of our subconscious within us that we carry. And so everything, memories are piled up. There may be something here that you're not seeing, that you're not realizing is making you react the way you do. So if we start with saying, okay, let's separate the topics. If I know that I make a list every day of all the things I need to do, and I'm not judging myself while looking at that list, it's just all the things that I need to do. If I'm ticking them off as I get through them, and I'm saying, don't worry, you can get through this, you can do this, right? Then you're actually able to celebrate at the end of a task that you've completed. So someone said, tough, why can't I do more or as much as someone else? Why isn't something working out that I'm trying so hard? Well, if we're speaking negatively to ourselves, we're actually creating more negativity around us. So if you think that you're not doing as well as somebody else, but the grass is never greener on the other side. Everyone has their struggles. Everyone has their negative aspects that happen in life. The key is the coping. So coping mechanisms, having proper coping mechanisms that allow us to be structured, to be organized, and to find the words with which to speak to ourselves in a way that's encouraging. So even imagine that you are treating yourself as your best friend, okay? Now, your best friend comes to you and they ask for your advice. Would you speak to yourself in the same way that you'd speak to your friend? The answer is probably no. And why? Because we have a tendency to be very tough on ourselves and nice to everybody else. The minute that game can change, that within yourself, you can say, you know what? Enough being tough on myself. I have to celebrate myself. I have to understand that the things I'm good at, I know where I can fail, and I can make fun of myself, and I can go of the attachment to an outcome and actually say, you know what? I know that I am not controlling life. I know that I can do my best in any situation. Once I know I've given it my brain time and I've done the parts that I needed to do, what do you do with it then? Do you worry and are you anxious waiting for something for the results? Or are you letting it be and saying, you know what? It's okay. Whatever's going to come back is going to be the right thing and I will deal with it. Can you answer me? Are you guys, so do you leave something alone once you've done the task, or do you sit and worry about it? Let go, let God. Perfect. So these are important questions, because the textures with which, let go, the textures with which we speak to ourselves can define an outcome. Strike it off the list and forget it. Awesome. I visualize it working out. Perfect. So the thing is being able to let go of something once you've done your best with it. The what if questions are daunting and they are absolutely useless. I'm sorry, but they are, because the what if is speculation that doesn't actually help you in guiding your journey, because it creates noise. Self-analyze sometimes too much. Revisit and critique. So the critique within yourself is the one that you have to let go of. Worry, but getting better at letting go, though sometimes it's with a sense of being resigned. So the inner critic has to be looked at with a tooth comb. You need to actually, with a cognitive eye here, observing yourself and noticing how useful every single thought that you're having is, whether it's useful. It's like an example, somebody said, you know, they put on their computer to pay their phone bill, they took the credit card, and they're like, oh, poor me, I have to do all this by myself. And they spend half an hour with those thoughts, causing pain and causing anguish to themselves, rather than putting on the computer, paying the phone bill, shutting the computer, and carrying on, right? So self-anguish how to silence the inner critic. So the silencing of the inner critic, first you have to get to know your inner critic, right? First you have to actually observe it, make notes, take a piece of paper, write down everything that your inner critic is telling you. And it's really funny. And you take same time every day for a week, spend a few minutes, write down everything your inner critic is telling you. Yeah. Once you've got the words out on a piece of paper, let go of them from your mind. Yeah. And then half an hour later, when you're feeling differently, go back and look at that paper. Because moods can evolve, moods can change, right? But our baseline, our core stays intact. So it's really important to realize that the moods do not make us, and we are not those moods. We are everything but those moods. The mood is actually a theater of imagination. It's nothing that's helpful or useful. So by writing down everything your inner critic's telling you, and then going back and looking at it and saying, is that useful to me? Does it help me? And how can I reframe those words of the negative inner critic and turn them into positive? How can I rewrite the same thing but being kind to myself and saying, you know what, yeah, I get scared when something happens. Say, well, no, I don't have fear. I actually am excited and willing to see what can happen and what can transpire from this, and it's allowing me to grow. So taking the words of the inner critic and reframing them so that you're actually consciously making an effort to change the way you're thinking with yourself. The words we speak to ourselves are the harshest we have. And it's crazy that no one ever talks about the words that they speak to themselves, right? And it's actually the most important thing to do, because that's where the baseline is of who we are and how we're behaving and how we're functioning. If we're projecting negative, it's like when you're going to a shopping mall and you're looking for a car parking space and someone says, oh, I never find a space, and they don't find a space. And someone says, I find a space right now every time I come, and you will. So there's a lot of this, people think it's funny and it doesn't make sense, but it actually works. The positive projections help us. I'm going to read this comment. So this is because of nature. If we read Thomas Hobbes, we are all living from our own survival. The same situation which was before social contract is now repeating. And the question about knowing ourselves, for that we have to explore the existentialism. So yes, we all have to explore our deeper natures, and we all have to push ourselves to go outside our comfort zone, right? Because I know for sure that we all have the tools within us to cope with anything. If there's anything I do know for sure, that is it, is that we all have the strategies, we all have the coping. Now, how we talk to ourselves at the prime base is the beginning of that conversation of change, right? If we think we are capable or we don't think we're capable, we're right, because we create that reality for ourselves. So if I want to speak to myself critically, or I let bygones be bygones, or I laugh at myself if I do something silly, the idea is that at each stage, we can have a different eye in the way we're looking at ourselves. We can change it. Who says we can't, right? So a lot of times we actually think that the way we're seeing something is the only way to see it. But that is the furthest from the truth. Any situation can be perceived in a million different ways. And depending on your nature of how you perceive things yourself, if you're more fearful or you're more optimistic and positive, will change it, right? So who has the power of choice? You do. You have the power to change absolutely anything you want. The key is to first identify what are the things we want to change. A lot of times, we don't realize the things that are troubling us because we're not looking at it consciously. Yeah. So by understanding what you want to change, then you're able to take the steps towards evolving or getting through it. And I think the key is to find humor in even the small things. Find humor in the detail. I mean, none of us would have imagined to be sitting in the end of May the way we are and what's happened in the last few months. At New Year's 2020, did anyone imagine this to be the situation? We plan for things, but God takes over, right? Universe, whatever one's beliefs are. So how we decide to live with that reality, we can stress ourselves out, but we're just harming our own bodies by stressing ourselves out, right? There's only you have the power to change you, no one else. So if you decide that, well, you know what? It's all okay because I don't know what's happening tomorrow, but a lot of people don't know what's happening tomorrow. I am willing to trust in me, trust in you. So if I trust myself, the aspect of trusting another human being becomes irrelevant, because if I trust myself, I know that my judgment will be okay. And I can trust the judgment I have, meaning judgment as in the decisions you make, the judgment you have upon an event, not judgment as in judging someone, yeah? So if I trust myself, I can trust that the outcome that will come based on my decisions will be the right one. And if it's not, I can't be blaming anybody else because I've made my own decisions myself to trust. So even if someone deceives me, my decision is saying, well, I say, you know what? It's okay because I'm the one who trusted. So I made a mistake. It's my mistake. It's not that person's mistake. Now, if I'm not clear with my cognitive eye and looking at my intuition and understanding my thought processes, then I won't be able to have the intuitive capacity to make the right decision. So where does intuition step into your world? Are you more in the mind? Or are you more in your intuition? How do you forgive yourself for big mistakes you've made? By being kind to yourself, knowing that you've made those mistakes. The fact that you've actually made the mistakes and you're admitting them to yourself and you're acknowledging them is half the journey. So any journey towards resolution, the first step is to be aware of it. The minute you have the awareness is half the solution already. Because by crying over spilt milk, as they say, what are you actually achieving for yourself? What are you actually helping yourself with by not forgiving yourself? What good are you doing? How is it positive for your life, for your world, for your environment, for your loved ones, if you're being tough on yourself, right? So the key is, the most important part of this is to be kind to you first. And be aware if you're being kind or you're not being kind to yourself. Understanding the voice that you speak to yourself with. A lot of times it's so subconscious we don't even realize. So actually raising the volume on that inner voice and the inner critic and saying, how many of the thoughts that I'm thinking on a daily basis are actually useful for me? And how many of them can I just let go of, shut off the noise, and live more peacefully? Because we have the choice. Any situation, you have a choice in your response. Not react, but response, right? Because if we're reacting, we're acting off the edge without any awareness. If we're responding, it means we've absorbed, we're thinking, and we're responding appropriately. Responsibility, the word, is just the ability to respond appropriately. And that ability to respond appropriately depends on how we're feeling within. And the only person that controls the way we're feeling within is us, because we have a choice. Same situation, 10 different people go through an identical situation, you'll have 10 different reactions, 10 different outcomes. Why? Because each person handles it depending on the size of their heart, the experiences they've had as a child. And it's all good because you can choose how to respond. And the minute we realize we have that choice is such a liberating freedom, because no one else decides for us. Now, if we are emotionally based and we are emotionally charged, our habit is to react and to dramatize something. But if you're doing that, you know you're doing that. And you know that you can change it. Now, is that a call of the ego? Is that looking for more attention? Is that, woe is me, I need to feel sorry for myself? Is that looking for outside validation? Is it looking for instant gratification? It depends, right? But you know what your triggers are. You know how you respond. You know exactly how you're handling things. And if you realize that you have the power to change them because you're the only one who does, it frees you to be able to say, well, no, I want to do this differently. Yeah. So the coming up with the touch system was something that took time, and it was difficult because you want to be able to put different realms of things into one word. So the acronym of touch, easy to remember because you should say touch. It's tolerance, it's openness, it's unity, it's collaboration, and it's harmony. So tolerance is all about saying, well, am I able to manage any other person that's around me, however large a trigger they are for me, however annoying they are? I know that they're not nice, or I know that they're not doing something correctly. Can you actually sit with it, unattached, detach, unattached? I prefer the unattached rather than detached because detachment seems like it's cold. But can you remain unattached? Look at the person, observe them, handle them without any reaction. Are you able to tolerate other types of people's notions of well-being and what they're thinking for themselves? They're not imposing it on you, and you're not imposing yours on them. That is the height of tolerance. And sadly, very few people function with that. Very few people actually practice the art of tolerance. So if we had to measure your journey with tolerance, and you had to say from 1 to 10 how tolerant you are, what would you say? Are you guys going to write? 7, 5. A lot of 7s. 1 being not tolerant at all. So a 5 means that you are not tolerant actually, right? Because if it's 5, it could be this way or that way. And if you had to define the triggers that you have where your tolerance fails, could you put a word to it? Because having the definition of where our tolerance fails allows us to then change it, right? We're able to then reframe it into something else. Any words for expectation? So expectations being attached to an outcome, yeah? The only person that that's affecting is you with you. And if you're attached to an outcome of something, you're actually harming your own well-being by being attached to it, right? So if the expectation is of an event happening, is of something, if you're able to take that and hand it over to universe and say, well, I don't have any more expectations of this because it's not in my best interest to. I find that expectations remove the glass ceiling. They remove the capacity to grow something to its maximum or to its optimum because we're putting a limitation on it. So it's funny because there's 2 ways of seeing things like that, right? Regrets. I'm not tolerant to stupid people. Yeah. So a big trigger for many people is to incompetence. And if you realize that actually by reacting to incompetence, you're only hurting yourself, it makes us the fools, right? Because we're getting angry at someone who's doing something, who's got no relevance in our life. And by me being angry, I'm hurting my own body. I'm hurting my system, because every disease comes from dis-ease in the mind, yeah? Every disease in the body comes from dis-ease in the mind. So if I'm getting angry with someone outside of myself because of their incompetence, I'm only hurting myself. So why would I choose to hurt myself based upon someone else's incompetence? It's completely useless for me. It's on the contrary, it's harmful. So being able to actually resonate with ourselves, saying, well, I need to protect myself, and I need to be, I need to create a bridge, a barrier here. Yeah. So anything between here and my heart doesn't touch me, right? And anything that comes impacts me outside. So it's like you're putting yourself in this bubble, and you're saying that anything that attacks you in terms of your well-being or changes your state of mind, you leave it outside. So that between there and your heart, everything is peaceful. And it's literally, it's something that can be learned. We can learn this as a tool to actually protect ourselves from these foolish things, because that's just hurting ourselves, 100%. So coming from tolerance to openness. Openness, I mean, you could say actually all the words collaborate together somehow. Openness is the ability to see someone else's point of view and opinion and let it be there. You're not trying to change them. They're not trying to change you. The ability to accept someone the way they are. Acceptance is a big thing. And how tolerant are we in accepting other people's habits and behaviors? I mean, if we could practice this and everybody practiced this, we could have world peace at some point, because being accepting of other people's ideas is so important. Being able to not make someone else wrong. So my consigliere said to me, if I don't make you wrong, you have no reason to be stubborn with me. Yeah. So if I don't make you wrong in your opinion, and I validate and I accept your opinion and what you think, yet sharing my viewpoint if I so choose or you so want me to, then we can actually have a proper conversation, a decent one, where we're both sharing. If I want to make you wrong because I want to be right, there is no communication. It's not possible to actually find a bridge, right? So the whole the aspect of tolerance is being able to build bridges instead of borders, and being able to align with allowing people to think what they want, and you having respect for their thought process and them respecting yours. It seems obvious as a thought, but how many of us actually practice that 24/7? What if it impacts you, someone's opinion of how things should be done and wants you to do it that way, even though you don't agree or don't want to do it that way? Well, the question is, how do you handle it? How do you react to them? I mean, are you forced to listen to them? Do you have to listen to them? Do you have to do it the way they want? Or is it possible to have a discussion and say, well, finding the middle ground? So the communication, I mean, I know that Feisal will be sharing with you the Enter the Garden module, so you'll have the notion of communication in there. The question becomes, but what if it touches your ethics and beliefs? Well, are they making you change your ethics and beliefs? Are you able to tolerate their ethics and beliefs? See, everything is a question of how we communicate. If we communicate peacefully, someone may be saying something. I remember a story of this person saying they would just say yes. They would always say yes to anything that was coming their way. Because they're saying the way you respond to it, you can validate that person and their beliefs and still find a way of finding a middle ground and doing things the way you want to. It's not always, it's a question of your tolerance. If you're upset about something, if it's touching your ethics and your beliefs, does it mean other people have to share your ethics and beliefs as well? Or is it okay for them to have their own opinions? You know, a lot of times the intolerance that we have is our own making. It's us who are being rigid with ourselves because of our system, as opposed to allowing others the possibility to have their own thoughts and beliefs. Because I'm saying, even, I mean, if I look at my child, his experiences on his day, it doesn't mean that I know every single thought he's going through his mind. He's living his life with his homeschooling and he's doing his thing. I have to go from behind his eyes to understand him. It's not in me observing him and looking at him that I can understand what he's going through. if I go and put myself in his shoes and look at it from behind his eyes, then I would understand better what is going on. So if you said it's touching your ethics and beliefs, what if you were to go behind the person's eye and see it from their perspective? Because a lot of times what we don't realize is that a person's intentions may not be bad in what they're suggesting to us. We may not like the context of the things they're saying, but if their intention is good and they have communication issues, or they're talking badly, or they're upset, it's a very different journey when you're looking at it from behind their eyes and saying, what is their intention? And by looking at it from a perspective of intention, you understand much better where they're coming from and how you can respond to them. I am a black and white person. Gray doesn't exist in my colors. I'm so sorry for you. Gray is a place of peace, only because the gray allows us to not force a decision, not force an opinion, not have to put something in a box and shelf it. And that's actually the biggest place of peace, is where you can sit comfortable in discomfort and allow things to simmer. And that's actually the biggest place of growth. What if it's a negative intention, e.g. a manager trying to oust you, a colleague trying to shift blame to others? But you know that, right? So if you know that, I mean, are you being assertive in your communication, and are you functioning from fear? How are you coping with that situation? Are you able to be assertive and speak your truth? So every situation, we all go through every type of situation, and we all go through it from different places because we are all at different stations on the same journey. And everybody has all the good intentions in the world. It may be that they haven't yet realized them, right? So if we take it from a notion that everybody has good inside them, and everybody has a positive intention at some point, and it could be, I mean, they say like the axe murderer who comes and rings the door, but or a gunman comes to the door and says, "Are you in the house?" And you say, "No, he's not there." And you're lying about it, saying, well, it's not allowed to lie, but you're lying for good reason. Yeah. So in the same way, the axe murderer, they say that the axe murderer as a child was never cajoled or caressed by his mother, and he was always beaten up. And that's what turned him into becoming the way he did, right? Now, does that allow you to gain sympathy for the axe murderer? Does it allow you to actually change your impression and say, gosh, every person is such a compilation of everything they've been through in life? Does it allow people to be victims for life? No, because we can all grow, we can all learn, we can all change. But if you're seeing something from behind the person's eyes and you know that they're being foolish, or they're being wrong, or they're being negative in their intention, you know how to deal with it. But do it from a place of kindness. Do it from a place of empathy. Do it from a place of seeing why they could possibly be, they may be threatened by you. They may feel jealous. I mean, there's many reasons. And it's easy to be a monk sitting at the top of a mountain, but to be a monk, to be peaceful sitting in everyday life is the challenge we all have, right? So being able to look at a situation and diffuse it and disarm it rather than go into it with detachment allows you to keep safe yourself and to see it from a different eye, right? So the eye that we speak to ourselves with, I need to come back to the touch because I didn't finish. So the tolerance, the unity, the openness, unity, I'd written, everyone is included and no one is excluded. We want to create peace and prevent prejudice thinking. Prejudice thinking, we are all guilty of prejudice thinking because of how we've been raised, how we've been taught, what we've learned. And the process of unlearning to be able to take on a new frame is a journey. It's a journey towards finding the pink sunglasses rather than wearing the black ones, right? So how we change our impressions, and we know that it's only us who are capable of changing our impressions. And it's so much fun to know that we can do that, right? So openness, so touch, tolerance, openness, unity, collaboration, and harmony. Collaboration, are we actually always making an effort to do what's best for all around us? Or are we in resistance sometimes? Are we looking at things from a different eye, or feeling upset about something and you're not reacting properly to something else? How are we actually doing this? So the level of honesty you have with yourself and knowing yourself and understanding yourself with that cognitive eye, to be able to thereafter find peace in every single moment of every single day with every single situation that happens. And how do we do that? Collaborating is really about the intention to say, well, I want, for every relationship, for every person who enters my world, I want it in the highest and best. And if a person is aggressive, or they are nasty, or they are mean, or they are unwilling, how can I find the place of peace to come to them with that will actually allow them to be peaceful too? And finding what those things are. So it's always about looking at it from behind the other person rather than looking at it straight up from us. I think that becomes really important. And then harmony, the acceptance, boundaries, respecting boundaries, allowing people their boundaries is so important. And taking our own boundaries and keeping our boundaries intact. That's the level, that's respect. So unconditional love, protection of humanity and nature. So if we look at the world today and where we are, and nature is thriving again, and the world has become a completely different place, economically speaking, but we look at nature and we say nature is thriving. We were all doing crazy things before and we weren't paying attention to what nature needed. And maybe this is a reframe. Maybe it's a reframe for nature and the ozone layer and the carbon footprint and all of these things to change. And maybe there was a bigger disaster awaiting us had this not happened. I mean, we don't know, right? And the only thing we know is that we don't know. And finding truth, which truth? Because there's your truth, my truth, there's a real truth. There's black and white in these situations is very difficult. It's very frustrating for you if you want to stay in black and white, because how do you actually reason with things? How do you find that place of calm to be able to let things be? What if your boss is asking you to bribe someone? This is what I mean about ethics. How can I see it in his perspective? That means he really wants whatever that's, principles. But I mean, he has to be accepting that that's not within your principles, right? I mean, are you going to lose your job because you don't listen to your boss? Is he going to make that sort of consequence for you? How can you see it in his perspective? You can suggest to him that there may be other solutions to resolving whatever it is that he wants and why he wants to bribe that person, right? And they say solutions, it's always three. Any decision you have to take, it's never two options. There should always be a third option, because when you have a third option, one always finds the good resolution. So whenever making a decision, find for that 3 different options of going to him and suggesting things out of the box that he could do. And I'm sure you'll find the answer. And perhaps he would reason with it better as well, if there's another option. Yeah. So Faisal, I don't know if about the question and answer, it's 10 to 4. If you want
Yes,
to.
we can go ahead.
Yes, we can go ahead.
I mean, we have 10 more minutes.
We have 10
So
more
if
minutes.
you can share in the chat, in the Q&A, questions that you have regarding contextual reality, the voice with which we speak to ourselves, and the touch system that Sukaiyna shared.
The other thing I just wanted to say is that the word discipline, there's discipline, the noun, and there's discipline, the verb. And if we make it a habit to practice discipline, the noun, rather than the verb, life changes dramatically. So discipline, the noun, is I have a discipline that there's always flowers in the house. I have a discipline that there's always chocolate cake in the house. The discipline, which is structure. Yeah. Discipline, the noun would be, I wake up on time, I'm ready on time, I'm at work on time, I have my certain habits. Yeah. Discipline, the verb, is if I'm running late in the morning and then I scream at my child because it's not his fault that I was running late. Yeah. So discipline, the noun, is being able to be the same person if you've had a bubble bath, slept 10 hours and woken up, or had roadworks going on, a fight with your partner, and you wake up. So being able to stay constant in a state that is constant. So if one uses, just as a practice from here on, if you say, I will ensure that I am using discipline, the noun, with myself and with my environment and with everyone I come across, rather than discipline, the verb, it changes actually the whole energy around you, because there's no forcing anything. And the inner critic, your inner critic, becomes your friend by saying, I'm helping you to become the way you want to be. Yeah. So do we have any questions?
Can you share with us some of the discipline, the noun, that you have put in place in order to support yourself in terms of the voice that you speak to yourself with, the contextual reality that you spoke to, and the touch system, so that the people who are listening would be able to consider some of those habits or disciplines, as you said, noun, in their day-to-day?
Right. So the discipline, so for example, in the lead up to this, yeah, to the Zoom, it's my first that I'm doing, and I'm an introvert. So I'm not very good at the extroverted things. Yeah. And the lead up to it was, I had to be silent. I did not talk to myself negatively. I did not say anything to myself. I did not even think about it. I just allowed it to be, right? And to get comfortable with it. So discipline, the noun, is actually setting up the habits and the structure of the way you want to see your world. Yeah. So if there's something troubling in your environment, can be from. See, I've worked from home, so I'm used to the structure of working from home. I know a lot of people took a lot of time to adapt to the environment of working from home. So if you have difficulty in structuring your day, by just telling yourself the things you expect of yourself, writing them down. I mean, even doing it as a SWOT analysis, like what are the things you're struggling with, and finding the reframe to be able to change it and do it differently. But I think the first key is to really get to know you. So there's a question. I have a poor coping method in using avoidance to avoid doing things and avoid the fear and pain of rejection. Sending out resumes to apply for jobs after being fired from last job. Please help. Honestly, that's, the coping mechanism that you need is to actually be kind to you. You need to be kind to you, and the fear or pain of rejection. Actually, I personally, I think where I've reached is a place where if there's something that happens that's against what I thought should happen or I thought was going to happen, I actually look up at the sky and I'm like, interesting. I wonder why that happened. Because I actually believe that we are all being looked after. Now, depending on your school of thought or your faith, I believe that we all have something in the universe that is helping us. So what if you were to not look at it as being you, but look at it as being a beautiful gift for you to find the next beautiful job? Because if you're avoiding sending out the resumes, you will not find the path to where you want to be, right? And if you know why you were fired, or you don't understand why you were fired, establishing also the frame as to why that happened and being able to coin it the way you want to see it. Because you can choose. You can say being fired was the best thing that ever happened to you. And a lot of times that is what happens. And a lot of the stuff you read on the self-help stuff is saying basically if you see one door closing, another door opens, and all those types of theories, right? But if you're actually being avoidant, who are you harming? And knowing that you're harming yourself, what is the use of that? How is that actually going to help you? So, and then that comes from that can be insecurity. It can be driven by fear of failure, fear of the unknown, all of these types of fears. But you have to be kind to you. You have to be nice to you. You have to be able to say, it's okay, darling. Most of the inner voice are usually negative. Most important habit to change it. Absolutely. And this is why for me, the most important thing is because I'm saying we never sit with people and talk about the inner voice that we have with ourselves. And how crazy is that, right? Because that's the person you are with from the moment you're born till the moment you die is with you. There's nobody else who's with you, who knows you as intimately as you know yourself. Now, I was telling you about how the subconscious functions with the conscious mind, right? Now, there's a girl who goes to see a therapist, and she said, I don't know why I'm stressed out. I feel like I have to eat chocolate all the time. And they did regression therapy, and they found out that as a child, anytime she was stressed, her mother would say, oh, don't worry, darling, have a piece of chocolate. So it became her habit, right? Now, to be able to know ourselves and the patterns we have to be able to put them down. And to actually start cheerleading ourselves, because no one else can do it for us. Yeah. So Feisal is going to be sharing with you all the Garden of Ayden 6 modules. Every week we'll send you a module. And in those modules, you have all the material to help you change those things. And you have the self-reflective tools, the documents that you can work with. And you do them at the beginning, and then you do it after you finish the course, and you see how much you've evolved in the process. Because a lot of times we can't measure the changes we make within, because they're voices in our own minds. But finding a way to measure that and to actually celebrate each success of growth is really important. We have to be nice to ourselves. Why are we beating ourselves up all the time? I mean, if we can't be nice to ourselves, how can we expect anyone else to be nice to us? Right? So that.
Thank you very much, Sukaiyna.
Thank you.
So we'll be sharing. Whoa, don't know what's happening with the voice. So we'll be sharing a week at a time over 6 weeks, all the different modules, so people can review, take stock of where they are and how they've progressed over time using the touch model. So thank you for helping us understand what contextual reality is, and to have us reflect once again, to be able to look at and consider to reframe the voice that's within ourselves and how we speak to ourselves and the touch system. So thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and sharing the preparation that you did for this experience that you just had. And thank you very much, everybody, for being with us, taking the time from your schedule, even though I know some of you are not cocooning anymore. And we'll see you next week on Wednesday. We have Anissa, who is our intuitive healer, and is going to be sharing how our thoughts and emotions affect our body. And the week after, how Dr. D will be sharing with us how our mind affects our body and our body affects our mind. So thank you very much, everyone. I wish you a good rest of the day. For some of us, it's already evening, so we're going to be having dinner. And hope to see you soon. And again, Sukaiyna, thank you very much, and wish you a great afternoon. Okay.